The spark, May 30th, 1967. Enugu. The air was still, hot, and heavy with the smell of dust and diesel. A crowd gathered in front of the government house, their faces tight with anticipation. Soldiers in olive green uniforms stood at attention, rifles slung across their shoulders, sweat trickling down their temples. On the balcony above them, a tall man in a khaki tunic adjusted his microphone. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumgwu, the military governor of eastern Nigeria. He looked down at the sea of faces, men, women, and children who had lost everything to violence and hate, and spoke words that would change the course of a nation. Fellow countrymen and women. I, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumgwu, military governor of eastern Nigeria, by the authority and consent of the people, do hereby proclaim the Republic of Biafra. A roar erupted, flags newly sown, with a rising sun blazing across red, black, and green waved in the air. Drums pounded, tears flowed. For a moment, freedom felt real, but in the silence that followed the celebration, everyone knew what came next: war. Only 7 years earlier, in 1960, Nigeria had stood together under one flag, celebrating its independence from Britain. But the euphoria didn't last. The country was a fragile mosaic, hundreds of ethnic groups forced into one nation by colonial borders that ignored history and culture. Beneath the surface, distrust simmered. By 1966, that distrust had exploded. A group of mostly Igbo officers staged a coup in January, killing Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa and several northern leaders. Though the coup's leader, Major Chukwuma Kadununziagwu, claimed it was to end corruption, many in the north saw it as an Igbo plot to seize power. In July, a counter-coup led by northern officers struck back, killing Nigeria's first military head of state, Major General Johnson Egwuironsi, who was Igbo. The cycle of revenge had begun. Across the northern cities Kano, Kaduna, Zaria, massacres erupted. Igbo men were hunted in the streets. Trains and lorries returning east carried not goods, but bodies. Over 30,000 Igbos were killed. Hundreds of thousands fled, carrying children on their backs and fear in their eyes. By the time they reached the east, they wanted one thing: separation. Oyukwu, the Oxford-educated governor, became their voice. He believed Nigeria could no longer hold. Negotiations were attempted. The Buri Conference in Ghana promised peace, but the promises died on arrival. General Yakubu Gowon, the new head of state, refused to let the East go. Now, standing on that balcony in Enugu, Oyukwu knew the line had been crossed. The Republic of Biafra was born, but so was its enemy, the Federal Republic of Nigeria. At Lagos headquarters, General Gowon received the news in silence. His advisors spoke in low tones, their faces grave. "If we allow secession," one said, "the country will disintegrate." Gowon nodded slowly. "Then we must keep Nigeria one." The order was signed. Troops began to move. By July 1967, the first shots of the Nigerian Civil War, or as it would later be called, the Biafran War, echoed across the border towns of Nsukka and Garkum. The Nigerian army advanced from the north, while Oyukwu's hastily assembled Biafran troops fought back with old rifles, courage, and desperation. For young Biafran soldiers, many barely out of school, the dream of independence meant everything. They painted slogans on their helmets: "No going back, to live or die for Biafra." But reality came fast. The federal forces had aircraft, artillery, and foreign support. Biafra had little more than conviction. In the fields near Nsukka, Corporal Ifeanyi, a 19-year-old mechanic-turned-soldier, crouched behind a termite mound, gripping a Lee Enfield rifle older than he was. The sound of mortar shook the ground. He could see smoke rising in the distance, villages burning, people running. "We can't stop them," his commander whispered. "Fall back." By September, the Nigerian army had taken Nsukka, then Bani, cutting off key routes to the sea. Biafra was being squeezed from every side. Yet, Oyukwu's voice on the radio kept hope alive. "We shall fight on," he said. "We shall endure." For Biafra must survive, but survival would demand everything. And for the millions trapped inside the new republic, the worst was yet to come. The siege, January 1968, Umuahia, eastern Nigeria. The new capital of Biafra buzzed with uneasy activity. Enugu had fallen, forcing Oyukwu to move his government deeper into the heartland. The city streets were lined with sandbags and burnt-out vehicles, remnants of air raids that came almost daily. In the underground radio station known as Voice of Biafra, a young announcer adjusted the crackling microphone. Her voice trembled, but she steadied it. "Good morning, Biafrans. This is Radio Biafra, calling on all our brave soldiers and citizens. Remember, no force on earth can crush our spirit." Her words reached villages and trenches, giving people something to hold on to as their world collapsed around them. The Nigerian military was advancing from every direction. Federal divisions under Colonel Murtala Mohammed and Colonel Benjamin Adekunle, later called the Black Scorpion, pushed through the Midwest and down toward the Niger Delta. Their orders were clear-cut Biafra off completely. By May, Nigerian troops had reached Port Harcourt, Biafra's last major seaport. Once that fell, the Republic would be landlocked. The battle raged for weeks, machine guns, rocket fire, and screams echoing through oil installations and mangrove swamps. Biafran defenders fought ferociously, but were outnumbered and outgunned. When the city finally fell, soldiers wept openly. Without access to the sea, food and medicine could no longer reach them. The blockade had begun. From that moment, Biafra became an island, a desperate nation surrounded by enemies and slowly starving. Fuel ran out, hospitals turned into morgues. The once bustling roads now carried convoys of refugees, barefoot and hollow-eyed, moving from one devastated village to another in search of food that no longer existed. In the markets of Orlu and Owerri, mothers bartered family heirlooms for a handful of gari or cassava peels. At night, families boiled grass and tree bark. Children's bellies swelled, their skin cracked, and their hair turned reddish from malnutrition. The world would soon see these images: skeleton-thin bodies, children with lifeless eyes, and call it the Biafran tragedy. But inside Biafra, survival became an act of defiance. Doctors and nurses, both local and foreign, set up makeshift clinics in churches and abandoned schools. Missionaries risked their lives to bring smuggled supplies through Cameroon and Gabon. One of them was Dr. Bernard Kauckner, a French physician who would later found Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, after witnessing the horror here. He wrote in his diary, "We treated children so small they could fit in our palms. They didn't cry anymore. They just stared." In the towns still under Biafran control, engineers worked day and night, creating what the world would later call the Biafran spirit. They built weapons from scrap metal, brewed petrol from palm oil, and repaired aircraft with spare parts from cars. Every man became an inventor, every woman a provider. At the heart of it all, Oyukwu remained unshaken. Dressed in his khaki uniform, he moved between the radio station and his underground command bunker. "We cannot surrender," he told his cabinet. "If we do, our people will cease to exist." But cracks were forming. The Biafran army, once filled with enthusiasm, was breaking under exhaustion. Ammunition was scarce. Pilots flew outdated planes, like the tiny B-6 Invader and the improvised Biafran babies, dodging Nigerian MiGs to drop supplies in the dark. On the front lines near Onitsha, Corporal Ifinias, the same young man from Nsukka, was now hardened by months of fighting. His uniform hung loose on his frame. He looked across the Niger River, watching enemy shells light up the night sky. Around him, his comrades whispered prayers. "We used to fight for freedom," he said quietly. "Now we fight just to stay alive." Each morning brought new rumors. Some said the international community would intervene. Others believed Britain, Nigeria's former colonial master, was secretly supplying the federal forces. In truth, both were happening. Britain, protecting its oil interests in the Niger Delta, armed the Nigerian government. France, in turn, quietly supported Biafra. The Cold War had found its way into Africa's deadliest conflict. By the end of 1968, over 500,000 people were dead, most from hunger, not bullets. Yet the radio kept broadcasting, the soldiers kept fighting, and Oyukwu kept promising that Biafra would never fall. But as the new year approached, it was clear that time and food were running out faster than hope. The death of Biafra, October 1969. Owerri, Biafra. The rain fell hard, pounding the mud roads and rusted rooftops. Thunder rolled in the distance, blending with the thud of artillery. The town was one of the last strongholds still in Biafran hands. What was once a provincial city was now the heart of a dying republic. Inside a dimly lit bunker, Colonel Joe Achuzia, one of Biafra's most daring commanders, spread a torn map on a table. The front lines were shrinking by the day. "We're surrounded on 3 sides," he muttered. "But we hold Owerri, we hold Biafra." His men nodded, their eyes hollow but resolute. Most were farmers and students turned soldiers, their uniforms faded and patched. They loaded the few bullets they had left, whispering in Igbo, "Chukwu gozie enyi, God bless us." Outside, the Nigerian army was tightening the noose. Under Major General Murtala Mohammed in the north and Colonel Benjamin Adekunle in the south, the federal forces had perfected a brutal war of attrition. Villages were bombed, crops were burned, roads were mined to choke off whatever lifelines remained. The war had become less about fighting and more about starving the enemy into submission. Across the front lines, Nigerian propaganda leaflets fluttered down from planes. "Surrender now," they read. "The war is over. Gowan forgives all." Few believed it. Too many had seen too much. By late 1969, the Biafran army was disintegrating. The once proud divisions had become scattered militias, tired, hungry, and desperate, yet even in defeat, some refused to yield. In Uli, a small airstrip hidden in the jungle, the last artery of Biafra's survival still pulsed. It was there that Swedish and Irish pilots, flying old cargo planes, risked everything to deliver crates of food and medicine under cover of night. Each landing was a miracle. The runway lights were just torches hidden under barrels, lit only when a plane was seconds away. Children would cheer when they heard the engine's proof that the world hadn't completely forgotten them. But even that light was fading. In December 1969, Nigerian jets bombed Uli. The airstrip was shattered. No more supplies came. Oyukwu's once defiant broadcasts grew shorter. His voice, once firm and commanding, was quieter now. Almost tired, he knew the end was near. On January 7, 1970, Biafran troops made their last stand at Amici. The fighting was chaotic and brutal, hand to hand, house to house. By nightfall, the town was gone. Survivors crawled through the fields, some carrying wounded comrades on makeshift stretchers. The dream of Biafra was bleeding out in the mud. That night, Oyukwu called an emergency meeting of his cabinet. The bunker was silent except for the hum of a generator. He looked at each of them, eyes weary but proud. "We have fought with courage," he said. "But to continue is to condemn our people to extinction." 2 days later, Oyukwu boarded a plane to Ivory Coast, seeking asylum. As the engines roared to life, he looked back one last time at the land he had sworn to defend. His aide, Major Nwoko, asked softly, "Sir, what happens now?" Oyukwu didn't answer. He simply said, "Pray for them." In his absence, his deputy, Major General Philip Effiong, stepped forward. On January 15, 1970, in a small room lit by kerosene lamps, he addressed the nation on radio. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Fellow countrymen, the Republic of Biafra hereby ceases to exist. We accept the authority of the federal government of Nigeria." Across the land, soldiers laid down their arms. Some wept, others stared blankly at the ground. In villages, people came out of hiding, weak and broken. The war was over. General Yakubu Gowon announced the end of the conflict in Lagos that same day. "No victor, no vanquished," he declared. His words were meant to heal, but the scars ran deep. In the months that followed, millions of displaced people tried to return home. The roads were lined with skeletal remains of vehicles, and the fields were littered with unexploded shells. Entire towns had vanished. Families were divided, some never to reunite. Aid finally flowed in. Food, medicine, and blankets arrived too late for many. The estimates varied, but historians would later agree. Over 1 million Biafrans, mostly civilians, had died, not from bullets, but from starvation. Yet, from the ashes, Nigeria tried to rebuild. The war became something people didn't talk about openly, but it shaped everything that came after: the politics, the mistrust, the sense of fragility beneath the surface of unity. For those who lived through it, like Corporal Ifeanyi, now a gaunt, quiet man walking home to a village he barely recognized, the war never truly ended. He once fought for freedom, now, he just wanted peace. He paused by the roadside, watching the sunrise over the ruined fields. The same sun that had shone on Biafra's flag now rose over a country trying to forget. But history never forgets. It waits quietly until someone dares to remember. If this story moved you, share it. The war for memory is not fought with guns, but with truth. Tell someone about the Biafran War, the Civil War that tore Nigeria apart, and the million lives that paid the price.